My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 3 weeks ago, my mother disinvited me from her wedding reception after I had already paid $15,000 for the venue, flowers, and catering. What she did not expect was that I would pick up the phone and call the venue owner directly. What happened next changed everything between us forever and taught me the most valuable lesson about standing up for yourself when family takes your generosity for granted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The relationship between mothers and daughters is supposed to be built on mutual respect, unconditional love, and shared experiences that create lasting bonds. For 28 years, I believed my relationship with my mother, Patricia Mitchell, embodied these ideals despite the challenges we had navigated together. What I discovered during the planning of her third wedding was that my understanding of our relationship had been fundamentally flawed, and that my role in her life had been reduced to that of a financial safety net rather than a beloved daughter. Patricia had been married twice before. Her first marriage to my father, Robert, had ended when I was 12 years old, following his struggle with alcohol addiction and the financial instability that accompanied his disease. The divorce had been messy and prolonged, leaving our family in significant debt and forcing my mother to work multiple jobs while completing her nursing degree. During those difficult years, I had assumed responsibilities far beyond my age, caring for my younger brother Michael, while Patricia worked evening shifts at the hospital and attended classes during the day. The second marriage to David Kowalski had lasted 6 years and had provided the stability that our family desperately needed. David was a successful contractor who owned his own company, and he treated Michael and me with kindness and respect while providing the financial security that allowed Patricia to focus on her career rather than survival. I had hoped that David would become a permanent fixture in our lives, but Patricia ended that marriage citing irreconcilable differences that she never fully explained to Michael or me. Following her divorce from David, Patricia had received a substantial settlement that included half the value of their shared home and a portion of his business assets. Rather than using this financial windfall to secure her future or invest in her children's education, she had spent the money on what she described as finding herself through travel, expensive hobbies, and a lifestyle that reflected her newfound freedom. Within 3 years, the settlement money had been completely depleted, and Patricia was once again facing financial uncertainty. During this period of financial instability, Patricia began dating Richard Henley, a divorced man in his early 50s, who worked as a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. Richard presented himself as successful and financially stable, driving expensive cars and taking Patricia on elaborate vacations that she documented extensively on social media. What became apparent over time was that Richard's lifestyle was maintained through credit and loans rather than actual wealth, but Patricia either failed to recognize this reality or chose to ignore it in favor of the excitement and attention that their relationship provided. The announcement of Patricia's engagement to Richard came during a family dinner 6 months ago. She displayed the diamond ring with obvious pride while explaining that they planned to have a destination wedding in the mountains, followed by an elaborate reception for family and friends. The estimated cost for their celebration was approximately $25,000, a sum that neither Patricia nor Richard possessed given their respective financial situations. When Patricia explained their financial constraints while maintaining their determination to proceed with the expensive celebration, I recognized the implicit request for assistance that had become a familiar pattern in our relationship. Throughout my adult life, I had provided financial support for various emergencies and expenses, from car repairs to medical bills to assistance with mortgage payments. Each request had been presented as temporary and essential, with promises of repayment that were rarely fulfilled. My financial ability to assist Patricia had been the result of careful planning and disciplined saving throughout my career as a software engineer. After graduating with a computer science degree from Northwestern University, I had secured a position with a technology company in Chicago that offered competitive compensation and excellent benefits. Rather than inflating my lifestyle to match my income, I had maintained modest living expenses while maximizing my contributions to retirement accounts and building an emergency fund that had grown to substantial proportions. The decision to pay for Patricia's wedding expenses was not made impulsively or without consideration of the implications. I understood that $15,000 represented a significant portion of my savings, but I also believed that supporting my mother's happiness during what she described as the most important day of her life was worth the financial sacrifice. More importantly, I hoped that my generosity would strengthen our relationship and demonstrate my love and support for her new beginning. The wedding planning process revealed aspects of Patricia's personality that I had not previously recognized or had chosen to overlook. She approached the arrangements with an entitlement and demanding attitude that surprised vendors and created tension during what should have been enjoyable planning sessions. When discussing menu options with the caterer, Patricia would dismiss suggestions based on cost considerations and insist on premium selections without regard for the budget constraints. Her interactions with the florist followed a similar pattern, with requests for elaborate arrangements that exceeded the allocated funds. During these planning sessions, Patricia would frequently reference the fact that she was not paying for the celebration as justification for her expensive preferences. She would make comments such as, "Since Sarah is covering this, we might as well do it right," or, "We should upgrade everything since we have the budget for it." These statements made me increasingly uncomfortable, but I rationalized them as excitement, rather than manipulation. The guest list for the reception became another source of conflict, as Patricia continued adding names without consulting me about the increased costs. When I expressed concern about the growing number of attendees and the corresponding increase in catering expenses, Patricia responded with irritation and accused me of trying to control her wedding. She explained that Richard's extended family and her work colleagues were essential guests who could not be excluded, regardless of the financial implications. The venue selection process revealed additional challenges in Patricia's approach to planning. The location she ultimately chose was a historic mansion that specialized in luxury events and charged premium rates for their services. When I reviewed the contract and realized that the venue costs alone would exceed my intended budget, Patricia became defensive and explained that this was her dream location and that compromising on the venue would ruin her entire vision for the celebration. Richard's involvement in the planning process was minimal and uncomfortable. He would attend meetings when specifically requested, but rarely offered opinions or took responsibility for any decisions. When vendors asked questions about preferences or requirements, Richard would defer to Patricia while making jokes about being just along for the ride. His passive approach to planning his own wedding celebration created additional pressure on me to manage details and make decisions that should have been handled by the couple themselves. The financial arrangements for the wedding expenses were formalized through a series of payments that I made directly to vendors rather than giving cash to Patricia. This approach was intended to ensure that the funds were used specifically for wedding-related expenses, but it also meant that I was directly responsible for managing relationships with multiple service providers. When changes or additions were requested, vendors would contact me for approval since I was the party responsible for payment. The week before the wedding ceremony, Patricia called to inform me that she and Richard had decided to honeymoon in Europe for 3 weeks immediately following the reception. The cost of this extended vacation was approximately $8,000, funded through credit cards and a loan against Richard's retirement account. When I expressed surprise that they were taking on additional debt so soon after the wedding expenses, Patricia became defensive and explained that they deserved to celebrate their marriage properly. The morning of the wedding ceremony, which was held at a small chapel near the reception venue, I arrived early to assist with final preparations and ensure that everything proceeded smoothly. Patricia appeared nervous but excited, and our interactions were warm and affectionate as we prepared for what we both anticipated would be a memorable celebration. Richard seemed more anxious than excited, but I attributed his demeanor to normal pre-wedding jitters, rather than any deeper concerns about the marriage. The ceremony itself was beautiful and emotional, with Patricia and Richard exchanging vows that emphasized their commitment to supporting each other through future challenges. As I watched my mother promise to love and honor her new husband, I felt genuine happiness for her apparent joy and optimism about their future together. The photographer captured numerous images of our family during the post-ceremony period, and I looked forward to having these memories of what I expected would be a perfect day. The transition from the chapel to the reception venue should have been seamless, but instead became the moment when everything changed. As guests were departing the chapel and preparing to drive to the reception location, Patricia approached me with an expression that I initially interpreted as concern about logistics or timing. What she told me instead was that there had been a change in the reception plans, and that I would not be attending the celebration that I had funded. The shock of this announcement was so complete that I initially thought I had misunderstood her words. When I asked for clarification, Patricia explained that she and Richard had decided that my presence at the reception would create tension and drama that would detract from their celebration. She claimed that recent conversations between us about wedding expenses had revealed fundamental differences in our relationship that made it inappropriate for me to attend their party. The reasoning Patricia provided for excluding me from the reception was both vague and contradictory. She suggested that my concerns about costs had created negative energy that would affect the celebration, while simultaneously acknowledging that I had paid for everything and that the event would not be possible without my financial contribution. When I asked specific questions about what I had done to warrant exclusion, Patricia became evasive and repeated general statements about wanting to avoid conflict on her special day. Richard stood beside Patricia during this conversation but did not participate in the explanation or offer any clarification about their decision. His silence felt like complicity in what was becoming the most hurtful experience of my adult relationship with my mother. The other family members and friends who had attended the ceremony were unaware of the drama unfolding and were beginning to ask questions about timing and directions to the reception venue. The public nature of this confrontation added humiliation to the emotional devastation I was experiencing. Guests who had witnessed the ceremony and expected to celebrate with our family at the reception would now wonder about my absence. The explanations that Patricia and Richard would need to provide would inevitably cast me in a negative light, regardless of the actual circumstances that had led to my exclusion. In that moment of complete betrayal and shock, I realized that my relationship with my mother had been fundamentally different from what I had believed throughout my adult life. The woman who had raised me and whom I had supported through multiple life transitions was capable of accepting my generosity while simultaneously rejecting my presence at the celebration that generosity had made possible. The lesson was devastating, but necessary, and it would reshape how I approached relationships and boundaries for the rest of my life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Standing in the parking lot of the chapel, still wearing the dress I had carefully selected for my mother's reception, I experienced a moment of absolute clarity that would define my response to this unprecedented betrayal. The shock and hurt that had initially paralyzed me began to transform into something more powerful and purposeful. I realized that Patricia's decision to exclude me from the reception while keeping my financial contribution represented a level of disrespect and manipulation that required a decisive response. The practical implications of the situation became immediately apparent as I considered the various contracts and payments that had been made in my name for the reception services. The venue, catering, flowers, photography, and music had all been arranged through my direct financial responsibility, meaning that I maintained legal authority over these arrangements regardless of Patricia's wishes regarding guest attendance. This realization sparked an idea that would allow me to respond to her betrayal in terms she would understand completely. Rather than creating a scene in the chapel parking lot or attempting to argue with Patricia about her decision, I chose to leave quietly and allow her to proceed with her plans while I considered my options. The drive home provided time to process the emotional impact of what had occurred while also planning a strategic response that would be both appropriate and effective. By the time I reached my apartment, I had developed a clear course of action that would demonstrate the consequences of taking someone's generosity while rejecting their presence. The first call I made was to Rebecca Martinez, the owner and event coordinator for Grandview Manor, the historic venue where Patricia's reception was scheduled to begin in 3 hours. Rebecca had been professional and accommodating throughout the planning process, and she had worked directly with me on all arrangements since I was responsible for payment. When I explained that there had been a change in circumstances and that I would need to cancel the event immediately, Rebecca was understandably concerned about the timing and implications. "Sarah, I need to understand what's happening here," Rebecca said after I had explained the basic situation. "The vendors are already setting up, the catering staff is preparing the meal, and guests will begin arriving in a few hours. Canceling at this point will create significant problems for everyone involved." I explained to Rebecca that while I understood the complications my decision would create, I was the party financially responsible for all arrangements, and I no longer wished to provide funding for an event from which I had been excluded. The legal and contractual authority was clearly mine, and I was exercising that authority to protect my interests in a situation where my own family had chosen to exploit my generosity. Rebecca listened carefully to my explanation and reviewed the contracts and payment records that confirmed my financial responsibility for all aspects of the reception. After consulting with her legal advisor, she confirmed that I had the right to cancel the arrangements, though she strongly encouraged me to consider the implications for all parties involved. When I assured her that I had considered these implications carefully and that my decision was final, she agreed to proceed with the cancellation. The process of canceling a wedding reception 3 hours before the scheduled start time required coordination with multiple vendors and service providers. The catering company needed to halt food preparation and dismiss staff who had been scheduled to work the event. The florist was contacted to arrange removal of arrangements that had already been delivered and installed. The photographer and musicians were notified that their services would no longer be required, though they would still receive payment according to their contractual terms. Rebecca handled these cancellations with professionalism while keeping me informed of each vendor's response and any complications that arose. The catering company was particularly affected since they had already prepared a significant portion of the meal and had scheduled additional staff for the event. The florist was concerned about the arrangements that had been specifically designed for the venue and would be difficult to repurpose for other events. During this process of cancellation, I maintained communication with Rebecca about the best approaches for handling the situation with arriving guests. She suggested posting notices at the venue entrance explaining that the reception had been canceled due to unforeseen circumstances, with apologies for any inconvenience caused. This approach would provide information to guests without requiring detailed explanations about the family conflicts that had led to the cancellation. The financial implications of the cancellation were substantial but manageable within the framework of the contracts that had been negotiated. Most vendors required payment for services already provided, or materials that could not be returned, but several were willing to provide partial refunds for unused services. The total loss was approximately $12,000, representing the majority of my investment in Patricia's celebration, but the alternative of allowing the reception to proceed while I was excluded seemed far more costly in terms of personal dignity and self-respect. As the cancellation process was being implemented, I received numerous phone calls and text messages from family members and friends who had been invited to the reception. These communications ranged from confusion about logistics to direct questions about family conflicts that might be affecting the celebration. I chose not to respond to these inquiries immediately, recognizing that any explanations I provided would inevitably become part of a larger family drama that I preferred to avoid. The most difficult communication came from my brother Michael, who called to ask whether there were problems with the reception since he had received conflicting information about timing and location. Michael had been looking forward to the celebration and had arranged childcare for his 2 young children so that he and his wife could attend. When I explained the basic situation without providing extensive details about Patricia's decision to exclude me, Michael was shocked and offered to boycott the reception in solidarity with me. I discouraged Michael from taking any dramatic actions that might escalate the family conflict or create additional problems for his relationship with Patricia. The situation was between Patricia and me, and I did not want other family members to feel obligated to choose sides or become involved in disputes that did not directly concern them. Michael's support was meaningful and appreciated, but his presence at whatever alternative celebration Patricia might arrange was more important than any gesture of solidarity with me. The emotional processing of these events was complex and overwhelming, involving grief for the relationship I had believed existed with my mother, anger at the betrayal and manipulation I had experienced, and satisfaction at having responded decisively to protect my interests. The combination of these emotions created a psychological state that was both draining and energizing, leaving me exhausted by the intensity of the experience, while also feeling empowered by my ability to take effective action. By evening, the cancellation process was complete, and Grandview Manor stood empty on what should have been the night of Patricia's celebration. Rebecca called to confirm that all vendors had been notified and that the venue was secured for the evening. She expressed admiration for my handling of a difficult situation and suggested that my decisive response had likely prevented a more problematic outcome that could have affected multiple parties negatively. The silence from Patricia and Richard was notable and telling. Neither had attempted to contact me directly to discuss the cancellation or to negotiate any alternative arrangements. This lack of communication suggested that they were either unaware of the cancellation until guests began arriving at an empty venue, or they were too shocked by my response to formulate an appropriate reaction. Either way, their silence confirmed that they had not anticipated consequences for their decision to exclude me while keeping my financial contribution. The lesson learned from this experience extended far beyond the specific circumstances of Patricia's wedding. I had discovered that setting boundaries and enforcing consequences for unacceptable behavior was not only possible, but necessary for maintaining self-respect in relationships where generosity had been taken for granted. The cost of this lesson had been significant in both financial and emotional terms, but the value of what I had learned about standing up for myself would influence every relationship in my future. The transformation that began in the chapel parking lot when I received Patricia's ultimatum had been completed by evening when I sat in my apartment knowing that I had responded to betrayal with strength rather than submission. The woman who had been excluded from her mother's reception had become someone who understood that love and generosity should never be separated from respect and dignity. This understanding would reshape not only my relationship with Patricia, but also my approach to every relationship that would follow. The morning after canceling Patricia's wedding reception brought a profound stillness that felt both unsettling and liberating. As sunlight filtered through the blinds of my downtown Chicago apartment, I experienced the strange sensation of waking up to a completely altered reality. The previous day's events had fundamentally changed not only my relationship with my mother, but also my understanding of my own capacity for decisive action when faced with unconscionable treatment. The financial cost of my decision was substantial but quantifiable. $12,000 represented approximately 6 months of careful saving and disciplined budgeting. However, the emotional cost of allowing myself to be excluded from an event I had funded while maintaining financial responsibility would have been immeasurable and permanent. The choice between monetary loss and personal dignity had been clear once I recognized that these were the actual terms being presented. My phone remained silent throughout the early morning hours, which was remarkable given the magnitude of disruption that my cancellation had created for multiple parties. The absence of communication from Patricia, Richard, or other family members suggested either that they had not yet processed the full implications of what had occurred, or that they were too shocked by my response to formulate appropriate reactions. Either way, the silence provided necessary space for me to process the emotional aftermath of the most difficult decision I had made in my adult life. The psychological impact of standing up to family manipulation was complex and multifaceted. Relief at having taken decisive action was balanced by grief for the relationship I had believed existed with my mother. Satisfaction at having protected my interests was tempered by sadness at the necessity of such protection within a family context. The emotional processing required to integrate these conflicting feelings would take considerable time and reflection. During my years as a software engineer, I had developed analytical skills that proved valuable for examining the pattern of interactions that had led to this crisis. The relationship with Patricia had been characterized by repeated cycles of financial requests, temporary assistance, and unfulfilled promises of changed behavior or repayment. Each instance had been presented as exceptional and urgent, requiring immediate response without time for careful consideration of long-term implications. The wedding funding request had followed this established pattern, but had been amplified by the emotional significance of the occasion and the substantial amount of money involved. Patricia had leveraged my desire to support her happiness and my belief in the importance of family relationships to secure financial assistance that exceeded any previous request. The manipulation had been sophisticated and effective precisely because it had been built upon genuine emotions and legitimate family bonds. The planning process had revealed additional aspects of Patricia's character that I had either not recognized previously or had chosen to minimize in importance. Her sense of entitlement regarding expenses she was not paying, her dismissive attitude toward budget constraints, and her willingness to increase costs without consulting the person providing funding had demonstrated a level of selfishness that was difficult to reconcile with my image of her as a loving mother. Richard's passive participation in these dynamics had been equally troubling. His apparent comfort with allowing his fiancée to secure wedding funding from her daughter, while he contributed nothing to the financial arrangements, suggested either weakness of character or complicity in the manipulation. His silence during the confrontation at the chapel had confirmed that he was either unable or unwilling to advocate for fairness in a situation where his wedding celebration was being funded by someone else. The broader family dynamics that had enabled this situation were also worthy of examination. Michael and other relatives had been aware of Patricia's financial difficulties and her reliance on my assistance, but none had offered alternative solutions or questioned the appropriateness of expecting one family member to bear the entire financial burden for another's celebration. The acceptance of this arrangement as normal had contributed to Patricia's sense that she was entitled to my financial support without corresponding obligations of respect or consideration. The professional implications of this experience were significant for my understanding of boundaries and relationship management in all contexts. The skills required to navigate family manipulation were directly applicable to workplace situations where colleagues or supervisors might attempt to exploit generosity or professional dedication. The lesson about the importance of establishing clear expectations and consequences would influence my approach to professional relationships going forward. The financial recovery from this experience would require several months of careful budgeting and reduced discretionary spending. However, the $12,000 cost could be viewed as tuition for an invaluable education in self-respect and boundary enforcement. The lesson learned about the necessity of protecting oneself from exploitation, even within family relationships, was worth far more than the monetary cost of acquiring it. The social implications of my decision were beginning to become apparent, as friends and extended family members learned about the wedding cancellation. The explanations required to address questions about what had occurred were delicate and complex, requiring careful balance between honesty about the situation and discretion regarding family privacy. The challenge was to provide sufficient information to prevent speculation while avoiding unnecessary damage to relationships that might be repairable in the future. My professional network remained unaware of the family drama, which was appropriate given the personal nature of the conflict. However, the emotional processing required to deal with the situation was affecting my ability to focus on work responsibilities. The concentration required for complex software development tasks was being compromised by the mental energy devoted to analyzing and integrating the lessons from this experience. The physical manifestations of stress from this situation were also becoming apparent. Sleep patterns had been disrupted by the emotional intensity of recent events, and appetite changes were affecting normal eating routines. The physiological impact of family conflict was reminding me that emotional health and physical health were interconnected in ways that required attention and management. The question of future relationships with Patricia and Richard was complex and unresolved. The possibility of reconciliation would depend on their willingness to acknowledge the inappropriateness of their behavior and to demonstrate genuine understanding of why their actions had been unacceptable. Without such acknowledgement, any attempt at rebuilding the relationship would be superficial and vulnerable to similar problems in the future. The impact on my relationship with Michael was also a concern, though his initial response had been supportive and understanding. The family dynamics that had enabled Patricia's manipulation of me could potentially affect his relationship with her as well, particularly if she attempted to replace my financial support with expectations directed toward him. The protection of Michael from similar exploitation would require ongoing attention and communication. The lesson about the difference between love and financial support was perhaps the most important insight gained from this experience. Patricia's willingness to accept my money while rejecting my presence at the celebration it funded had demonstrated that she viewed our relationship primarily in transactional terms rather than as a genuine emotional bond. This understanding was painful, but necessary for making informed decisions about future interactions. The development of stronger boundaries in all relationships would be an ongoing process requiring consistent application of the principles learned through this difficult experience. The tendency to prioritize harmony over fairness had been a weakness that had enabled exploitation and manipulation. The commitment to maintaining self-respect, even at the cost of temporary conflict, would be essential for preventing similar situations in the future. The transformation that had begun with Patricia's betrayal was continuing through the process of analyzing and integrating the lessons from this experience. The woman who had been excluded from her mother's wedding reception was becoming someone who understood that generosity without boundaries was not kindness, but enabling. This understanding would reshape every relationship going forward, creating the foundation for healthier and more balanced interactions with all people in my life. The morning silence was finally broken by a text message from Rebecca Martinez at Grandview Manor, expressing concern about my well-being and offering support if needed. Her professional compassion and understanding had been invaluable during the crisis, and her continued concern demonstrated that business relationships conducted with integrity could provide more genuine support than family relationships built on exploitation. The contrast between Rebecca's respectful professionalism and Patricia's manipulative selfishness was striking and instructive. The venue owner, who had no familial obligation to care about my welfare, had shown more consideration for my interests than the mother who had benefited from years of financial support. This comparison highlighted the importance of evaluating relationships based on demonstrated behavior, rather than assumed obligations or emotional history. The day ahead would require practical decisions about communication with family members, financial planning to recover from the substantial loss, and emotional processing to integrate the lessons learned from this transformative experience. The work of rebuilding my understanding of relationships and boundaries was just beginning, but the foundation established through decisive action in response to betrayal provided a solid starting point for this important personal development. The silence of my apartment felt different now than it had 12 hours earlier. Rather than the emptiness of shock and betrayal, it had become the quietness of clarity and resolved purpose. The woman who had awakened to this new reality was fundamentally different from the one who had gone to sleep the night before, and this transformation would influence every aspect of her life going forward. The first external response to my decision came not from family members, but from Rebecca Martinez, whose follow-up communication demonstrated the profound difference between professional integrity and personal manipulation. Her text message expressing genuine concern for my welfare had been both unexpected and deeply meaningful, representing the kind of authentic care that I had hoped to receive from my own mother, but had been denied in favor of financial exploitation. Rebecca's approach to the crisis had been characterized by professionalism, empathy, and respect for my position as both the financial party and the injured party in the situation. Throughout the cancellation process, she had treated me as someone whose interests deserved protection rather than someone whose resources could be exploited. The contrast between her respectful handling of the situation and Patricia's callous dismissal of my feelings could not have been more stark or instructive. When Rebecca called later that morning to check on my emotional state and offer additional support, our conversation revealed the depth of her understanding regarding family dynamics and business relationships. As someone who had managed wedding celebrations for over 15 years, she had witnessed numerous instances of family conflict that had affected event planning and execution. Her experience had taught her that financial arrangements often revealed underlying relationship problems that extended far beyond wedding planning. "Sarah, I want you to know that what you did yesterday took tremendous courage," Rebecca said during our conversation. "Most people in your situation would have allowed themselves to be exploited rather than taking the decisive action necessary to protect their interests. You chose self-respect over family harmony, which is never an easy decision but was clearly the right one given the circumstances." Her validation of my decision provided external confirmation that my response had been appropriate and justified. The tendency toward self-doubt that had characterized my relationship with Patricia had made me question whether my reaction had been proportionate to the offense. Rebecca's professional perspective, informed by years of experience with similar situations, offered objective assessment that supported my choice to cancel the reception rather than allowing the exploitation to continue. Rebecca's insight into family dynamics extended beyond the immediate crisis to broader patterns of behavior that she had observed in her professional capacity. She explained that wedding planning often revealed the true nature of family relationships because the combination of high emotions, significant expenses, and public celebration created conditions where underlying tensions and inequalities became impossible to ignore. The stress of wedding planning had essentially forced Patricia to reveal her true priorities and values, which had been hidden beneath years of more subtle manipulation. "The way people handle wedding planning tells you everything you need to know about their character," Rebecca observed. "Your mother's willingness to exclude you while keeping your financial contribution showed that she viewed you primarily as a resource rather than as a person deserving of respect and consideration. That kind of transactional approach to family relationships is more common than you might think, but recognizing it and responding appropriately requires strength that not everyone possesses." The conversation with Rebecca began to shift my perspective from focusing on the immediate crisis to considering the broader implications of what I had learned about myself through this experience. The decision to cancel the reception had required me to overcome years of conditioning that had prioritized family harmony over personal dignity. The ability to take decisive action in defense of my interests had revealed capabilities that I had not previously recognized or exercised. Rebecca's professional experience had given her unique insight into the psychological dynamics that enable financial exploitation within families. She explained that generous family members often become trapped in cycles of increasing demands, because their initial willingness to help is interpreted as unlimited availability rather than situational assistance. The pattern typically escalates until a crisis forces the generous party to establish boundaries or accept permanent exploitation. What you experienced with your mother is actually quite common in families where one person has significantly more financial resources than others, Rebecca explained. The family members who need assistance often develop a sense of entitlement that grows over time. while the person providing support feels increasingly resentful but struggles to establish boundaries because of family loyalty. The situation usually continues until something dramatic forces a confrontation. This analysis helped me understand that my experience with Patricia was part of a broader pattern of family dysfunction, rather than an isolated incident of poor judgment. The realization that similar situations occurred in other families provided perspective that reduced the sense of personal failure and betrayal while highlighting the importance of the lessons I was learning about boundary enforcement and self-protection. Rebecca's willingness to share her professional insights represented a form of mentorship that was both unexpected and valuable. Her experience managing high-stress family situations had given her wisdom about relationship dynamics that extended far beyond event planning. The guidance she offered was practical and immediately applicable to my situation, while also providing frameworks for understanding and navigating future relationship challenges. The conversation revealed that Rebecca had started her event planning business after experiencing her own family crisis related to financial exploitation and boundary violations. Her personal understanding of the dynamics I was experiencing informed her professional approach to similar situations and explained the exceptional empathy and support she had provided during my crisis. Her transformation from victim of family manipulation to successful business owner who helped others navigate similar challenges provided a model for how traumatic experiences could become sources of strength and wisdom. The day I decided to stop allowing my family to exploit my generosity was the day I started building the life I actually wanted, Rebecca shared. It was painful and difficult, but it was also liberating in ways I hadn't expected. When you stop enabling other people's poor choices, you create space for your own growth and success. The energy you were spending on managing their problems becomes available for pursuing your own goals. This perspective reframed my current situation from a loss to an opportunity. The $12,000 I had spent on Patricia's canceled reception represented not just the cost of a lesson about family boundaries, but also an investment in my future freedom from financial manipulation. The emotional energy I had been devoting to managing Patricia's various crises would now be available for pursuing my own goals and interests. Rebecca's business success provided concrete evidence that boundary enforcement and self-protection could lead to positive outcomes rather than just avoiding negative ones. Her event planning company had grown from a small startup to a successful enterprise that served upscale clients throughout the Chicago area. The professional reputation she had built was based on integrity, competence, and respect for client interests, demonstrating that ethical business practices could be both personally satisfying and financially rewarding. The transformation narrative that Rebecca represented offered hope and direction for my own journey beyond the immediate crisis. Her example demonstrated that personal growth resulting from difficult family experiences could become the foundation for professional success and meaningful relationships with people who shared similar values regarding respect and integrity. During our conversation, Rebecca offered practical assistance that extended beyond emotional support to concrete help with the aftermath of the cancellation. She volunteered to provide documentation of the canceled event and vendor communications. That might be useful if Patricia or Richard attempted to create legal complications related to the financial arrangements. Her offer to serve as a witness regarding the circumstances of the cancellation demonstrated continued commitment to protecting my interests. Rebecca also offered to connect me with other professionals in her network who had experience with family, business conflicts, and boundary enforcement strategies. Her willingness to provide ongoing support and resources represented the kind of genuine assistance that I had hoped to receive from family members, but had instead found through a business relationship built on mutual respect and shared values. The practical aspects of recovery from the wedding crisis were beginning to crystallize through Rebecca's guidance and support. The financial impact could be managed through careful budgeting and reduced discretionary spending over several months. The emotional impact would require more time and deliberate processing, but the framework for understanding the experience as education rather than just loss was becoming clearer. The legal implications of the cancellation were minimal since all contracts had been properly executed and vendor communications had been documented throughout the process. Rebecca's professional handling of the situation had protected me from potential complications while ensuring that all parties were treated fairly, despite the unusual circumstances. Her expertise had been invaluable in navigating a complex situation that could have become much more problematic without proper management. The social implications of the situation would require careful navigation as family members and friends learned about the wedding cancellation and sought explanations for what had occurred. Rebecca's advice regarding communication strategies emphasized the importance of maintaining dignity while providing sufficient information to prevent speculation and rumor. The balance between honesty and discretion would be crucial for protecting relationships that might be salvageable while acknowledging the reality of what had occurred. The conversation with Rebecca concluded with her invitation to stay in contact. As I processed the ongoing implications of this experience, her offer to provide continued support and guidance represented the beginning of a mentor relationship that could provide valuable perspective as I worked to integrate the lessons learned and apply them to future relationship decisions. The impact of Rebecca's support extended beyond the immediate practical assistance to demonstrate that authentic relationships based on mutual respect and shared values were possible and available. Her professional integrity and personal compassion provided a model for the kind of relationships I wanted to cultivate going forward, in contrast to the manipulative and exploitative dynamics that had characterized my relationship with Patricia. The transformation that had begun with Patricia's betrayal was continuing through the recognition that genuine support and understanding were available from unexpected sources. The business relationship with Rebecca had evolved into something approaching friendship based on shared values and mutual respect, demonstrating that meaningful connections could develop in any context where people treated each other with integrity and consideration. The morning conversation with Rebecca marked a crucial turning point in my processing of the wedding crisis. Rather than remaining focused on the loss and betrayal I had experienced, I was beginning to recognize the opportunities for growth and positive change that had emerged from the situation. The support and guidance from someone who understood both the practical and emotional dimensions of my experience provided the foundation for moving forward constructively rather than remaining trapped in resentment and disappointment. The silence that had characterized the early morning hours was being replaced by purposeful activity and forward-thinking planning. The woman who had awakened to the aftermath of canceling her mother's wedding reception was beginning to envision the person she could become through applying the lessons learned from this transformative experience. The journey from victim of family exploitation to empowered individual capable of protecting her interests was well underway, supported by unexpected allies and guided by hard-won wisdom about the nature of healthy relationships. The second day, following the wedding cancellation, brought the inevitable confrontation that I had been simultaneously dreading and preparing for since making the decision to protect my interests. Patricia's silence had been temporary, providing only enough time for her to process the reality of what had occurred and formulate a response that would attempt to shift responsibility away from her actions while maintaining her position as the injured party in the situation. The phone call came at 7:30 in the morning, clearly timed to catch me before I could prepare mentally for the conversation or develop strategies for managing what was certain to be an emotionally charged exchange. Patricia's voice carried a combination of anger, desperation, and manipulative hurt that I recognized from previous conflicts where she had been forced to confront the consequences of her choices. The familiar pattern was beginning to repeat itself, but my response would be fundamentally different this time. "Sarah, what you did yesterday was absolutely unforgivable," Patricia began without any preamble or acknowledgement of her own role in creating the crisis. "You deliberately sabotaged my wedding reception and humiliated me in front of my friends and family. Richard and I spent the entire evening dealing with confused guests and trying to explain why there was no reception after we had promised everyone a celebration." The accusation that I had sabotaged her wedding reception revealed the depth of Patricia's inability to recognize her own responsibility for the situation. Her framing of events completely ignored the fact that she had chosen to exclude me from the celebration while expecting me to maintain financial responsibility for its costs. The manipulation was sophisticated and familiar, designed to make me feel guilty for protecting my interests rather than acknowledging the fundamental unfairness of her expectations. "Patricia, I want to understand something," I replied, maintaining a calm tone despite the emotional intensity of the conversation. "You made the decision to exclude me from the reception that I had paid for. What exactly did you expect me to do in response to that decision? Continue funding an event that I was not welcome to attend?" The question was direct and uncomfortable, forcing Patricia to articulate the logic behind her expectations rather than simply expressing outrage at my response. The approach represented a significant departure from my typical pattern of accepting blame and offering apologies during family conflicts. The boundary I was establishing through this question was as important as the cancellation itself had been. Patricia's response revealed the extent to which she had convinced herself that her behavior had been reasonable and justified. She explained that my exclusion from the reception had been necessary to prevent conflict and drama that would have ruined her special day. The irony that her decision to exclude me had created far more drama and conflict than my presence ever could have was apparently lost on her. Her reasoning demonstrated a level of self-deception that made meaningful resolution extremely difficult. "You were being negative and controlling about everything," Patricia continued, her voice rising with each accusation. "You were making demands about the guest list and complaining about the costs for things that were important to Richard and me. We decided that it would be better for everyone if you just provided the financial support and let us enjoy our celebration, without your constant criticism." The characterization of my budget concerns as negativity and control revealed Patricia's fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship between financial responsibility and decision-making authority. Her expectation that I would provide unlimited funding while accepting no input regarding how that money was spent represented a level of entitlement that was both shocking and illuminating. The conversation was clarifying the exact nature of the dynamic that had developed between us over years of financial assistance. "Patricia, let me ask you another question," I continued, recognizing that direct inquiry was more effective than defensive responses. "If someone else had been paying for your reception, would you have excluded them while keeping their money? Would you consider that fair treatment of someone who was generously supporting your celebration?" The silence that followed this question was profound and telling. Patricia was being forced to consider her actions from the perspective of basic fairness rather than personal entitlement. The hypothetical scenario removed her emotional investment in being the victim and required her to evaluate the ethics of her behavior objectively. Her inability to provide an immediate response suggested that she was beginning to recognize the indefensibility of her position. When Patricia finally responded, her tone had shifted from outrage to defensiveness, indicating that the direct questioning was having its intended effect. She began offering explanations and justifications that revealed the weakness of her position, while simultaneously acknowledging that some aspects of her behavior might have been problematic. The change in her approach suggested that maintaining the victim narrative was becoming increasingly difficult. "The situation was complicated, Sarah. Richard was feeling uncomfortable about the financial arrangements, and some of his family members were making comments about me relying on my daughter to pay for the wedding. We thought it would be easier for everyone if you weren't there to remind people about who was actually paying for everything." This explanation revealed additional layers of dysfunction in the situation that I had not previously understood. Richard's discomfort with the financial arrangements suggested that he had retained enough awareness to recognize the inappropriateness of the situation, but rather than addressing it constructively by finding alternative funding sources, he had chosen to advocate for my exclusion instead. His family's comments indicated that other people had recognized the problematic nature of expecting me to pay for their celebration. The most revealing aspect of Patricia's explanation was her admission that my presence would have reminded people about the source of funding for the reception. This acknowledgement demonstrated that she understood the optics of the situation were problematic and that public awareness of the financial arrangements would have created embarrassment for her and Richard. Rather than addressing the underlying issue by finding appropriate funding sources, they had chosen to hide the reality of the situation by excluding me. So you decided that the solution to your embarrassment about accepting money from me was to take my money while preventing me from attending the event it funded? I asked, maintaining the pattern of direct questioning that was forcing Patricia to confront the logical inconsistencies in her position. The question highlighted the fundamental contradiction in Patricia's reasoning and forced her to recognize that her solution had been both ethically problematic and practically ineffective. The cancellation of the reception had created far more public attention to the financial arrangements than my attendance ever would have generated. Her attempt to avoid embarrassment had resulted in the maximum possible embarrassment for everyone involved. Patricia's response to this question revealed the beginning of a shift in her understanding of the situation. For the first time in the conversation, she acknowledged that her decision might have been unfair to me, though she continued to maintain that her intentions had been good and that the outcome had been worse than she had anticipated. The partial acknowledgement of wrongdoing represented progress, even though it fell far short of full accountability. I know that excluding you wasn't the ideal solution, Patricia admitted reluctantly. But I was trying to manage a very difficult situation with Richard's family and their attitudes about our financial arrangements. I thought that if you weren't there, we could just enjoy the celebration without having to deal with their judgment and comments. The admission that she had prioritized Richard's family's comfort over my feelings and interests was significant, even though Patricia did not seem to fully recognize the implications of what she was acknowledging. Her willingness to sacrifice my dignity to avoid uncomfortable conversations with people who were essentially strangers to me demonstrated a level of disregard for our relationship that was both hurtful and clarifying. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Patricia gradually acknowledging additional aspects of her behavior that had been unfair, while continuing to maintain that her overall approach had been justified by the complex family dynamics involved. The partial progress was encouraging, but the fundamental issue of accountability remained unresolved. Patricia was willing to admit mistakes, but not to take full responsibility for the consequences of her choices. The most important development during this conversation was my own ability to maintain clear boundaries while engaging with Patricia's manipulation and defensiveness. The pattern of accepting blame and offering apologies that had characterized previous conflicts was replaced by consistent questioning that forced her to examine her own behavior rather than focusing on my responses to that behavior. The shift in dynamic was both empowering and exhausting. By the end of the conversation, Patricia had agreed to consider whether there might have been better approaches to managing the situation, but she had not offered any concrete steps toward resolution or accountability. The partial progress was sufficient to keep communication open while establishing that future interactions would need to be based on different principles than those that had governed our relationship previously. The impact of this conversation extended far beyond the immediate family conflict to demonstrate the power of asking direct questions that forced people to examine their own behavior and motivations. The technique had been effective in breaking through Patricia's defensive responses and creating moments of genuine reflection, even though complete accountability had not been achieved. The lesson about the importance of maintaining focus on other people's actions, rather than accepting responsibility for their emotional responses, would be valuable in all future relationship contexts. The realization that I possessed the ability to navigate difficult conversations while maintaining my position and protecting my interests was transformative. The woman who had previously accepted blame and offered apologies during family conflicts had demonstrated capacity for strategic communication that protected her dignity while creating opportunities for genuine resolution. The development of These skills would be valuable in professional contexts as well as personal relationships. The conversation with Patricia had also revealed the extent to which my previous approach to family conflicts had enabled her manipulation and prevented authentic resolution of underlying issues. By accepting blame and offering apologies, I had allowed her to avoid examining her own behavior while reinforcing patterns that made future exploitation more likely. The shift to direct questioning had disrupted these patterns and created possibilities for more honest and equitable interactions. The emotional aftermath of the conversation was complex, involving satisfaction at having maintained my boundaries, while also feeling sadness about the necessity of such protection within a family relationship. The progress that had been achieved was encouraging, but the work required to rebuild trust and establish healthier dynamics would be substantial and ongoing. The conversation had been a beginning rather than a resolution, but it represented significant movement in a positive direction. The lessons learned through this difficult conversation about the power of direct questioning and boundary maintenance would influence my approach to all future relationships, both personal and professional. The ability to force people to examine their own behavior, rather than accepting responsibility for their emotional responses, was a skill that would be invaluable in any context where manipulation or exploitation might occur. The transformation that had begun with the wedding cancellation was continuing through the development of communication strategies that protected my interests while creating opportunities for authentic relationship dynamics. The woman who had been excluded from her mother's wedding reception was becoming someone who understood how to navigate complex interpersonal situations while maintaining her dignity and principles. The week following my confrontational phone conversation with Patricia marked a period of profound psychological recalibration as I began to recognize patterns of manipulation that had extended far beyond the wedding crisis into virtually every aspect of our relationship throughout my adult life. The clarity gained through applying direct questioning techniques had revealed not only Patricia's inability to accept responsibility for her recent actions, but also the systematic nature of her approach to managing family relationships through guilt, obligation, and emotional manipulation. The professional implications of this personal revelation became increasingly apparent as I returned to my role at the technology company, where I had built a successful career as a senior software engineer. The analytical skills that had proven valuable in examining family dynamics were directly applicable to workplace relationships where colleagues, supervisors, or subordinates might attempt to exploit professional dedication or personal generosity. The boundary enforcement strategies I was developing through necessity in family contexts would serve as valuable tools for navigating complex professional situations. My position at Quantum Solutions, a mid-sized software development firm specializing in enterprise applications, had provided both financial stability and intellectual satisfaction throughout my career. The work involved designing and implementing complex systems that solved real business problems for clients across various industries. The technical challenges were stimulating and the compensation was competitive, but the most valuable aspect of my professional environment was the culture of respect and collaboration that characterized most interactions with colleagues and management. The contrast between the respectful professional relationships at Quantum Solutions and the manipulative family dynamics I had been navigating with Patricia was both stark and instructive. My colleagues treated me as a competent professional, whose opinions and contributions were valued, while Patricia had consistently approached our relationship from the perspective of what she could extract from me rather than what we could build together. The professional environment demonstrated that relationships based on mutual respect and shared goals were not only possible, but could be highly productive and personally satisfying. The recognition that healthy relationship dynamics were not only achievable, but were already present in significant areas of my life, provided hope and direction for addressing the dysfunction that had characterized my family interactions. The principles that governed successful professional relationships could be adapted and applied to personal contexts, creating frameworks for establishing boundaries while maintaining possibilities for meaningful connection and mutual support. During this period of reflection and analysis, I began to examine other relationships in my life to determine whether similar patterns of exploitation or manipulation might be present in less obvious forms. The exercise was both illuminating and concerning, revealing several friendships and family connections where the dynamic had been consistently one-sided, with me providing support, assistance, or resources while receiving minimal reciprocal consideration or genuine care in return. The friendship with Jennifer Walsh, a former college roommate who had maintained contact primarily through requests for career advice, professional references, or small loans, represented a clear example of the pattern I was beginning to recognize. Jennifer would contact me several times per year with urgent requests for assistance, accompanied by elaborate explanations of temporary difficulties that required immediate help. The pattern was similar to Patricia's approach, though the stakes were lower and the manipulation more subtle. Jennifer's requests typically followed a predictable format. She would begin with expressions of friendship and concern for my welfare, followed by detailed explanations of whatever crisis required assistance, and concluding with specific requests for help, along with promises of reciprocal support that were rarely fulfilled. The emotional manipulation was less aggressive than Patricia's approach, but followed similar principles of leveraging relationship history and projected future difficulties to secure immediate compliance with current requests. The realization that I had been enabling similar dynamics in multiple relationships was both disturbing and empowering. The pattern recognition skills I was developing through examining my relationship with Patricia were revealing opportunities for positive change that extended far beyond family conflicts. The commitment to establishing healthier boundaries would need to be comprehensive rather than limited to the most obvious cases of exploitation. My relationship with Michael, my younger brother, required careful examination to determine whether similar patterns might be developing despite his generally supportive and appropriate behavior during the wedding crisis. Michael's response to Patricia's treatment of me had been appropriately outraged and supportive, but our broader relationship history included several instances where I had provided financial assistance for various needs and emergencies. The key distinction was Michael's consistent appreciation for help received and his genuine efforts to reciprocate support when opportunities arose. The difference between Michael's approach and Patricia's entitled expectations highlighted the importance of examining relationship dynamics based on overall patterns rather than isolated incidents. Michael acknowledged assistance received, expressed genuine gratitude, and looked for opportunities to provide reciprocal support within his capabilities. Patricia approached assistance as an entitlement that created obligations for continued support rather than gratitude or reciprocal consideration. The professional development opportunities that emerged from applying these relationship analysis skills to my career were both unexpected and valuable. The ability to recognize manipulation and establish appropriate boundaries was directly relevant to managing interactions with difficult clients, navigating office politics, and negotiating project requirements that balanced client needs with realistic resource constraints. The personal growth resulting from family crisis was translating into enhanced professional capabilities. My supervisor at Quantum Solutions, David Chen, had been particularly supportive of my career development and had consistently provided opportunities for skill advancement and increased responsibility. The relationship with David was characterized by clear communication, mutual respect, and alignment of professional goals that benefited both individual and organizational objectives. The contrast with manipulative family dynamics was instructive and provided a model for healthy professional relationships based on shared values and mutual benefit. The technical project I was leading at Quantum Solutions involved developing a comprehensive customer relationship management system for a regional healthcare network. The complexity of the project required coordination with multiple stakeholders, management of competing priorities, and navigation of organizational politics. that could have derailed the initiative if not handled appropriately. The boundary enforcement skills I was developing through personal experience were proving valuable for managing professional challenges that required similar strategic thinking and diplomatic communication. The healthcare client had initially presented requirements that were both unrealistic and constantly changing, creating conditions similar to those I had experienced with Patricia's wedding planning. The client's expectations exceeded their budget constraints while their decision-making process was inconsistent and reactive. The parallel between professional and personal manipulation patterns was remarkable and provided opportunities to practice boundary enforcement in lower-stakes environments. The approach I developed for managing the challenging client relationship involved many of the same principles I had applied during the conversation with Patricia. Direct questioning about priorities and constraints forced the client to examine their own expectations and make realistic decisions about project scope and timeline. Clear communication about the relationship between resources and outcomes prevented unrealistic demands from derailing the project while maintaining positive working relationships. The success of this approach in the professional context provided additional validation for the boundary enforcement strategies I was developing through personal experience. The client's initial resistance to realistic constraints was similar to Patricia's defensive responses to direct questioning, but persistence and consistent application of clear principles eventually resulted in more productive interactions and successful project outcomes. The professional validation reinforced my confidence in applying similar approaches to personal relationship challenges. The transformation that was occurring through the integration of personal and professional growth was comprehensive and accelerating. The woman who had been excluded from her mother's wedding reception was developing into someone who understood how to protect her interests while maintaining possibilities for meaningful relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. The skills being developed through necessity in family contexts were enhancing professional capabilities and creating opportunities for continued growth in all areas of life. The financial recovery from the wedding cancellation was proceeding. According to the budget plan I had developed with guidance from Rebecca Martinez, the $12,000 loss was being absorbed through reduced discretionary spending and careful management of expenses, but the financial discipline required for this recovery was also creating habits that would benefit long-term financial security and independence. The lesson about the cost of enabling others' poor financial choices was influencing decisions about future financial assistance and investment strategies. The emotional processing of the family crisis was also progressing, though more slowly, than the financial recovery. The grief for the relationship I had believed existed with Patricia was real and significant, but it was being balanced by excitement about the possibilities for authentic relationships based on healthier dynamics. The support from Rebecca and the success of boundary enforcement in professional contexts were providing evidence that respectful, reciprocal relationships were achievable and sustainable. The recognition that personal growth resulting from traumatic experiences could become sources of strength and wisdom was perhaps the most important insight gained during this period of reflection and analysis. The pain of Patricia's betrayal had forced me to examine relationship patterns that had been limiting my potential for years. The crisis had created opportunities for development that might never have emerged through normal life experiences. The integration of lessons learned through family crisis with professional development and relationship analysis was creating a comprehensive framework for navigating complex interpersonal situations across all areas of life. The principles of boundary enforcement, direct communication, and mutual respect were proving applicable to virtually every relationship context, from family interactions to professional collaborations to casual friendships. The skills developed through necessity were becoming assets that enhanced overall quality of life and opened possibilities for continued growth and success. The morning routine that had developed during this period of intensive self-examination included time for reflection and planning that had not been part of my previous schedule. The emotional processing required to integrate the lessons from recent experiences needed deliberate attention and structured thinking time. The investment in personal development was yielding returns in terms of increased confidence, clearer decision-making, and more satisfying relationships across all areas of life. The woman who had awakened to the aftermath of canceling her mother's wedding reception was becoming someone who understood that healthy relationships required active maintenance and protection. The recognition that manipulation and exploitation were choices rather than inevitable aspects of family dynamics was liberating and empowering. The future held possibilities for authentic connection and mutual support that had not existed within the framework of previous relationship patterns. The second week following the wedding cancellation brought an unexpected opportunity that would transform my understanding of how personal adversity could be leveraged into professional advancement and meaningful contribution to others facing similar challenges. The opportunity emerged through Rebecca Martinez, whose support had evolved from professional courtesy into genuine mentorship, focused on helping me translate the lessons learned from family crisis into broader applications that could benefit both my career development and other individuals struggling with boundary enforcement in their personal relationships. Rebecca's event planning business had grown significantly over the past 5 years, expanding from wedding coordination to comprehensive corporate event management and strategic planning for major organizations throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. Her success had been built upon a foundation of ethical business practices, genuine client advocacy, and the kind of authentic relationship management that I had experienced firsthand during the wedding cancellation crisis. The principles that had guided her support of my situation were the same values that had driven her professional success and established her reputation as a trusted advisor for complex event planning projects. During our continued conversations about the aftermath of the wedding situation, Rebecca had observed that my analytical approach to examining relationship dynamics and my systematic development of boundary enforcement strategies demonstrated skills that could be valuable in professional consulting context. Her suggestion that I consider applying these capabilities to help other individuals navigate similar challenges was both flattering and intriguing, representing possibilities for meaningful work that extended beyond my current role in software development. The consulting opportunity that Rebecca proposed involved working with individuals who were experiencing family financial exploitation similar to what I had encountered with Patricia. Her event planning business frequently brought her into contact with clients whose family dynamics created complications for celebration planning, and she had identified a significant need for professional guidance that could help people establish appropriate boundaries while maintaining possibilities for healthy family relationships. The combination of analytical skills from my software engineering background and hard-won experience with family manipulation could provide valuable support for people facing similar challenges. The potential client base for this type of consulting service was substantial and underserved by existing professional resources. Traditional family counseling often focused on communication improvement and conflict resolution, without adequately addressing the power dynamics and financial exploitation that characterized many dysfunctional family relationships. Financial planning services typically address technical aspects of money management without considering the emotional and relational factors that influenced financial decision-making within family contexts. The intersection of relationship dynamics and financial boundaries represented an area where specialized expertise could provide significant value for individuals struggling with these complex issues. Rebecca's proposal that I develop consulting capabilities in this area was both exciting and daunting. The work would require translating personal experience into professional expertise, while developing systematic approaches that could be applied effectively to diverse situations and family configurations. The emotional investment required to help others navigate similar traumas could be substantial, but the potential impact on their lives and relationships could be transformative in ways that aligned with my deepest values regarding fairness, respect, and personal empowerment. The development of consulting expertise would require significant investment in training and certification that extended beyond my existing qualifications in software engineering and business analysis. The field of family systems consulting involved psychological principles, communication strategies, and legal considerations that would require formal education and supervised practice. Rebecca offered to provide guidance regarding appropriate training programs and professional development opportunities that could build the necessary expertise while maintaining my current employment and financial stability. The financial planning aspects of this career development opportunity were complex, but manageable within the framework of my existing resources and earning capacity. The certification programs and training courses would require investment of approximately $15,000 over an 18-month period, representing a significant commitment, but one that could be funded through careful budgeting and the disciplined saving habits that had already been established for recovery from the wedding cancellation costs. The potential return on this educational investment could be substantial if the consulting practice developed successfully and generated meaningful revenue within a reasonable time frame. The most compelling aspect of this opportunity was its alignment with the personal transformation that had been occurring since the wedding crisis. The growth that had emerged from examining family dynamics and developing boundary enforcement strategies could be leveraged to help others achieve similar empowerment and protection from exploitation. The pain and learning from my experience with Patricia could become sources of strength and wisdom that would benefit other individuals facing comparable challenges with their own family relationships. The integration of personal experience with professional expertise would require careful balance to ensure that consulting services were based on systematic knowledge and proven methodologies, rather than purely personal anecdotes or emotional responses to family trauma. The training programs that Rebecca recommended emphasized evidence-based approaches to family systems work that could provide the theoretical foundation necessary for effective professional practice. The combination of academic knowledge and personal experience could create a uniquely valuable perspective for helping clients navigate complex family dynamics. The timeline for developing consulting capabilities was realistic and achievable, within the constraints of my existing professional and personal obligations. The initial certification could be completed through evening and weekend coursework that would not interfere with my responsibilities at Quantum Solutions. The gradual development of consulting skills and client relationships could occur alongside my software engineering career, creating opportunities to test approaches and build expertise before making any major career transitions. The risk mitigation strategies built into this development plan provided security while pursuing new professional possibilities. The potential impact of this work extended beyond individual client relationships to broader social benefits related to family financial abuse and exploitation. The patterns I had experienced with Patricia were common across diverse family configurations and socioeconomic circumstances, creating widespread need for the kind of systematic support that specialized consulting could provide. The development of expertise in this area could contribute to larger conversations about family financial dynamics and the importance of boundary enforcement for maintaining healthy relationships across generations. Rebecca's mentorship during this decision-making process demonstrated the profound difference between authentic support and manipulative guidance. Her approach involved asking questions that helped me examine my own motivations and capabilities, rather than pressuring me toward predetermined conclusions that would benefit her interests. The contrast with Patricia's approach to influence was stark and instructive, providing additional evidence that respectful, empowering relationships were achievable when both parties shared similar values regarding mutual benefit and personal growth. The practical steps required to pursue this opportunity were clearly defined and immediately actionable. The first phase involved researching training programs and certification requirements to identify the most appropriate educational pathway for developing necessary expertise. The second phase would involve enrollment in selected programs and beginning the systematic study of family systems theory, communication strategies, and boundary enforcement methodologies. The third phase would focus on supervised practice and gradual development of client relationships under Rebecca's guidance and mentorship. The financial projections for a family dynamics consulting practice were encouraging based on Rebecca's experience with related services and the apparent demand for this type of professional support. The hourly rates for specialized consulting in this area were comparable to those for other professional services requiring similar levels of expertise and training. The potential client base was substantial and relatively underserved by existing providers, creating opportunities for establishing a sustainable practice that could provide both meaningful work and adequate financial compensation. The personal satisfaction that could result from helping others achieve the kind of empowerment and boundary enforcement that I had developed through necessity was perhaps the most compelling aspect of this opportunity. The transformation that had occurred in my own life through learning to protect my interests, while maintaining possibilities for healthy relationships, could be replicated for other individuals facing similar challenges. The expertise gained through personal adversity could become a source of professional contribution that would benefit both clients and the broader community. The decision to pursue this consulting opportunity represented a fundamental shift from viewing the wedding crisis as purely personal trauma to recognizing it as preparation for meaningful professional service. The pain and growth that had resulted from Patricia's betrayal were being transformed into capabilities that could prevent others from experiencing similar exploitation or help them respond more effectively when such situations arose. The personal investment in learning about boundary enforcement and healthy relationship dynamics was becoming professional capital that could generate both income and social impact. The integration of this new professional direction with my existing career in software engineering would require careful time management and strategic planning, but the combination of technical and interpersonal skills could create unique value. Propositions for clients dealing with complex family dynamics. The analytical approaches that had proven effective in software development were directly applicable to examining relationship patterns and developing systematic solutions for boundary enforcement challenges. The methodical thinking that characterized successful software engineering could enhance the effectiveness of family dynamics consulting. The emotional preparation required for this type of work was significant and ongoing. Helping others navigate family exploitation and manipulation would inevitably involve exposure to painful situations and difficult emotions that could trigger memories of my own experience with Patricia. The development of appropriate professional boundaries and self-care strategies would be essential for maintaining effectiveness while protecting my own emotional well-being. The training programs that Rebecca recommended included specific preparation for managing these challenges. The long-term vision for this consulting practice involved not only individual client services, but also potential development of educational resources, workshop presentations, and possibly written materials that could reach broader audiences struggling with family financial exploitation. The expertise developed through personal experience and professional training could be leveraged across multiple formats to maximize impact and create diverse revenue streams that would support sustainable practice development. The transformation from victim of family manipulation to professional consultant specializing in boundary enforcement and relationship empowerment represented the ultimate integration of personal growth with meaningful professional contribution. The woman who had been excluded from her mother's wedding reception was becoming someone who could help others avoid similar exploitation while building careers based on authentic service and genuine expertise. The journey from personal crisis to professional opportunity demonstrated that adversity could become the foundation for both individual empowerment and broader social contribution when processed with appropriate support and strategic thinking. The decision to pursue professional certification in family dynamics consulting required immediate implementation of the analytical and strategic planning skills that had served me well throughout my software engineering career. The transition from considering this opportunity as an abstract possibility to developing concrete action plans represented a crucial step in transforming personal adversity into professional advancement. The systematic approach that had characterized my response to the wedding crisis would now be applied to building expertise that could help others navigate similar challenges while establishing sustainable income streams that aligned with my Values and capabilities. The research phase of this career development project revealed the complexity and sophistication of professional family systems work, which extended far beyond the intuitive understanding I had gained through personal experience with Patricia's manipulation. The academic foundations of this field included psychological theories regarding family dynamics, communication strategies based on decades of clinical research, and legal frameworks that governed financial relationships between family members. The depth of knowledge required for competent professional practice was both intimidating and exciting, representing intellectual challenges that would stretch my capabilities while building expertise in areas that complemented my existing technical skills. The certification program that emerged as the most appropriate for my background and goals was offered through the Institute for Family Financial Dynamics, a nationally recognized organization that specialized in training professionals to address the intersection of family relationships and financial decision-making. The curriculum included comprehensive study of family systems theory, practical training in boundary enforcement strategies, legal education regarding financial exploitation and elder abuse, and supervised practice with actual client situations under the guidance of experienced practitioners. The financial investment required for this certification was substantial but manageable within the recovery budget I had established following the wedding cancellation. The total cost of $15,000 over 18 months represented exactly the amount I had lost through Patricia's betrayal, creating a symbolic transformation of that loss into investment in future capabilities and income potential. The parallel between the cost of enabling Patricia's manipulation and the cost of developing expertise to help others avoid similar exploitation was both ironic and motivating. The Institute's program structure was designed to accommodate working professionals who needed to maintain their current employment while developing new expertise. The coursework was delivered through a combination of weekend intensive sessions, evening webinars, and online modules that could be completed according to individual schedules. The supervised practice component would begin during the second semester and could be integrated with my existing work schedule at Quantum Solutions without creating conflicts or compromising my performance in either role. The application process for the certification program required detailed personal statements explaining my motivation for pursuing this career direction, professional references attesting to my analytical capabilities and interpersonal skills, and documentation of relevant life experiences that had prepared me for this type of work. The personal statement provided an opportunity to articulate how the wedding crisis had revealed both the prevalence of family financial exploitation and my own capacity for developing effective responses to such challenges. Writing about Patricia's betrayal and my response to it within the framework of professional development goals required emotional processing that was both difficult and therapeutic. The experience needed to be analyzed objectively as preparation for helping others rather than processed purely as personal trauma requiring resolution. The shift in perspective from victim to future professional was empowering and transformative, representing a fundamental change in how I understood the meaning and value of what I had endured. The professional references requested by the Institute came from David Chen, my supervisor at Quantum Solutions, Rebecca Martinez, and Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Northwestern University, who had been my academic advisor during my undergraduate studies. Each reference provider emphasized different aspects of my qualifications, creating a comprehensive portrait of someone capable of analytical thinking, ethical decision-making, and effective communication under challenging circumstances. The convergence of professional and personal recommendations strengthened my application while validating my decision to pursue this career direction. David Chen's reference focused on my technical competence and project management capabilities, emphasizing the systematic approach I brought to complex problem-solving and my ability to work effectively with diverse stakeholders who often had conflicting priorities and limited understanding of technical constraints. His assessment highlighted transferable skills that would be directly applicable to family dynamics consulting, where similar challenges regarding competing interests and communication barriers were common. Rebecca Martinez's reference provided detailed analysis of my performance during the wedding crisis, emphasizing my ability to make difficult decisions under pressure while maintaining ethical principles and protecting the interests of all parties involved. Her perspective, as someone who had witnessed my response to extreme family manipulation, provided credible evidence of my readiness for professional work that would involve similar challenges. Her continuing mentorship and support were valuable assets that strengthened my preparation for this career transition. Dr. Walsh's academic reference addressed my intellectual capabilities and learning strategies, drawing upon her observations of my performance in challenging coursework and my approach to research projects that required synthesis of complex information from multiple sources. Her assessment provided evidence of my ability to master new subject matter systematically while developing practical applications for theoretical knowledge. The academic foundation she described would be essential for success in the Institute's rigorous certification program. The acceptance notification arrived 3 weeks after submitting my application, accompanied by detailed information about the program schedule and preparatory reading assignments that would begin immediately. The Institute's communication was professional and supportive, providing clear expectations while acknowledging the significant commitment required for successful completion of the certification process. The tone and content of their materials reinforced my confidence in the quality and value of the training I would receive. The preparatory reading list included foundational texts in family systems theory, case studies of financial exploitation within family contexts, and research, reports documenting the prevalence and impact of these issues across diverse populations. The academic rigor required for mastering this material would complement my practical experience while providing theoretical frameworks for understanding and addressing complex family dynamics. The integration of academic knowledge with personal experience would create a uniquely valuable perspective for future client relationships. The first weekend intensive session was scheduled for 6 weeks after acceptance, providing sufficient time to complete preparatory reading while making necessary arrangements for balancing coursework with existing professional responsibilities. The time management strategies that had served me well throughout my career would be essential for successfully managing the increased demands on my schedule and attention. The organizational skills developed through software project management would be directly applicable to managing my own professional development project. The cohort of professionals entering the certification program represented diverse backgrounds and motivations, though nearly all had personal experience with family financial dynamics that had motivated their interest in this field. The group included social workers seeking specialized expertise, financial planners who had encountered family manipulation in their practices, attorneys dealing with elder abuse cases, and individuals like myself who had transformed personal adversity into professional purpose. The shared commitment to helping others navigate these challenges created immediate connections and mutual support among cohort members. The program faculty included both academic experts in family systems theory and experienced practitioners who had built successful consulting practices addressing these issues. The combination of theoretical expertise and practical experience provided comprehensive preparation for the complex challenges involved in professional family dynamics work. The faculty's commitment to ethical practice and client empowerment aligned with my own values while providing models for effective professional development. The curriculum structure progressed logically from theoretical foundations through practical skill development to supervised client work, ensuring that each competency was thoroughly developed before advancing to more complex applications. The systematic approach to learning reflected the Institute's commitment to producing competent professionals who could provide effective services while maintaining appropriate boundaries and ethical standards. The quality and rigor of the program reinforced my confidence in the value of the investment I was making in my professional development. The integration of personal experience with academic learning began immediately as I applied theoretical frameworks to understanding my own family dynamics and the patterns that had enabled Patricia's manipulation. The objective analysis of my situation using professional concepts was both illuminating and validating, confirming that my responses had been appropriate while revealing additional insights that would be valuable for helping future clients. The transformation of personal pain into professional expertise was proceeding according to the vision that Rebecca had articulated during our early conversations. The financial projections for a family dynamics consulting practice became more concrete as I learned about fee structures and client demand patterns within this field. The earning potential was substantial for practitioners who developed strong reputations and effective marketing strategies, with hourly rates comparable to other specialized professional services. The combination of meaningful work and adequate compensation would provide both personal satisfaction and financial security that could eventually replace my software engineering income if the practice developed successfully. The long-term vision for this career transition extended beyond individual client services to include potential development of educational resources, corporate training programs, and public speaking opportunities that could amplify the impact of my expertise while creating diverse revenue streams. The platform provided by professional certification would enable contribution to larger conversations about family financial dynamics while building recognition as an expert in this specialized field. The emotional preparation for this career direction involved continued processing of my experience with Patricia while developing strategies for managing the inevitable triggers that would arise when helping clients navigate similar challenges. The professional boundaries and self-care practices emphasized by the Institute's training would be essential for maintaining effectiveness while protecting my own emotional well-being. The support network developed through the certification program would provide ongoing resources for managing these challenges throughout my career development. The transformation from software engineer dealing with personal family trauma to certified professional specializing in family financial dynamics represented a complete integration of personal growth with professional advancement. The woman who had been excluded from her mother's wedding reception was becoming someone whose expertise could prevent others from experiencing similar exploitation while building a career based on authentic service and genuine competence. The journey from crisis to calling demonstrated that adversity could become the foundation for meaningful professional contribution when approached with systematic planning and appropriate support. The first semester of certification training at the Institute for Family Financial Dynamics proved to be significantly more challenging than my initial assessment had anticipated, requiring not only intellectual mastery of complex theoretical frameworks, but also profound emotional resilience. As I encountered case studies and scenarios that closely paralleled my own experience with family manipulation and financial exploitation. The academic rigor was comparable to graduate-level coursework, demanding comprehensive understanding of psychological principles, legal considerations, and communication strategies that would form the foundation of effective professional practice in this specialized field. The theoretical components of family systems dynamics required extensive study of psychological research that explained how patterns of manipulation and exploitation develop within family structures over multiple generations. The academic literature revealed that the situation I had experienced with Patricia was part of broader systemic issues that affected millions of families across diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, cultural contexts, and geographic regions. The prevalence of these patterns provided both validation for the importance of developing expertise in this area and sobering recognition of the scope of work that would be required to address these issues effectively. The case study analysis assignments proved particularly challenging as they required objective examination of family situations that contained elements similar to my own experience while maintaining professional detachment and analytical perspective. The emotional triggers that arose during these exercises highlighted the ongoing nature of my personal healing process and the necessity of continued self-awareness and boundary management as I developed professional capabilities. The Institute's training emphasized the importance of recognizing these responses and developing strategies for managing them appropriately within client relationships. Dr. Margaret Foster, the primary instructor for family systems theory, possessed extensive clinical experience and research expertise that provided credible guidance for navigating the complex intersection of personal experience and professional development. Her approach to teaching emphasized the value of lived experience while maintaining rigorous standards for professional competence and ethical practice. The balance she demonstrated between empathy and objectivity provided a model for the kind of practitioner I aspired to become through this training process. The legal education component of the certification program addressed the regulatory frameworks that governed financial relationships between family members, including statutes regarding elder abuse, financial exploitation, and the rights of individuals to control their own financial resources regardless of family pressures or expectations. The complexity of legal considerations surrounding family financial dynamics was substantially greater than I had realized, encompassing federal regulations, state laws, and local ordinances that could affect the advice and services that certified practitioners could provide to clients. The practical implications of legal boundaries within family financial consulting required careful attention to the distinction between providing educational information and offering specific legal advice. The scope of practice for certified family dynamics consultants was clearly defined to prevent unauthorized practice of law while maximizing the support that could be provided within appropriate professional boundaries. The legal education component included extensive training in recognizing situations that required referral to attorneys or other specialized professionals. The communication strategies curriculum proved to be among the most valuable aspects of the certification program, providing systematic approaches to the boundary enforcement techniques I had developed intuitively during my confrontation with Patricia. The academic foundation for direct questioning and strategic conversation management validated my instinctive responses while providing additional tools and frameworks that could be applied across diverse client situations and family configurations. Dr. James Patterson, who taught the Communication Strategies course, emphasized the importance of maintaining focus on client empowerment rather than simply resolving immediate conflicts. His approach aligned with my own values regarding the importance of helping people develop sustainable skills for managing difficult relationships rather than creating dependency on professional intervention. The emphasis on teaching clients to protect their own interests while maintaining possibilities for healthy family relationships resonated with my personal experience and professional goals. The supervised practice component of the certification program began during the 4th month of training, providing opportunities to apply theoretical knowledge and communication strategies with actual clients under the guidance of experienced practitioners. The transition from academic study to real client interactions required significant adjustment as I learned to manage the emotional intensity of family financial exploitation situations while maintaining professional boundaries and effective therapeutic relationships. My first supervised client was Margaret Thompson, a 68-year-old retired teacher whose adult son had been systematically draining her retirement savings through repeated requests for loans that were never repaid and gradually escalating demands for direct financial support. The parallels between Margaret's situation and my own experience with Patricia were striking, though the roles were reversed and the exploitation had been occurring over a much longer period. The opportunity to help Margaret develop boundary enforcement strategies was both professionally valuable and personally meaningful. Margaret's initial resistance to establishing boundaries with her son reflected the deep emotional investment that parents often have in maintaining positive relationships with their adult children regardless of the personal cost. Her fear that setting financial limits would damage her relationship with her son was understandable, but needed to be balanced against the reality that his exploitation was already damaging their relationship while threatening her financial security. The delicate process of helping Margaret recognize these dynamics required patience and strategic communication that drew upon all the skills I had been developing. The supervision provided by Dr. Patricia Williams, an experienced family dynamics consultant with over 20 years of clinical practice, was invaluable for navigating the complex emotional and practical challenges involved in Margaret's case. Dr. Williams emphasized the importance of allowing clients to reach their own conclusions about necessary changes, rather than prescribing specific solutions, an approach that respected client autonomy while providing the support needed for effective boundary enforcement. The progress that Margaret achieved during our 6-month working relationship was both gradual and transformative. The systematic approach to boundary setting that we developed together enabled her to establish financial limits with her son while maintaining emotional connection and family relationship. The success of our work together provided concrete evidence that the expertise I was developing could create meaningful positive change in the lives of people facing similar challenges to those I had experienced. The financial projections for my emerging consulting practice became more concrete as I gained practical experience and developed relationships within the professional community. The fee structure that Dr. Williams recommended was based on hourly consultation rates that reflected the specialized nature of this work, while remaining accessible to clients who were often dealing with reduced financial resources due to family exploitation. The balance between adequate compensation and client accessibility would be an ongoing consideration as I developed independent practice. The networking opportunities provided through the Institute's certification program connected me with experienced practitioners who offered valuable guidance regarding practice development, marketing strategies, and professional development beyond the basic certification requirements. The relationships formed with cohort members and faculty provided ongoing resources for consultation and collaboration that would support my professional growth throughout my career in this field. The integration of family dynamics consulting with my continuing career in software engineering required careful time management and strategic planning to ensure that neither professional commitment was compromised. The analytical skills that had proven valuable in technical work were directly applicable to family systems analysis, while the systematic approach to problem-solving that characterized software development enhanced my effectiveness in developing boundary enforcement strategies for clients. The personal transformation that was occurring through professional development extended beyond career considerations to fundamental changes in how I understood relationships, communication, and personal empowerment. The academic study of family dynamics provided theoretical frameworks that validated my intuitive responses to Patricia's manipulation while revealing additional insights that would influence all my future relationships. The growth that had begun with the wedding crisis was expanding through formal education and practical application. The emotional challenges of this career transition were substantial and ongoing, requiring continued attention to self-care and boundary management as I navigated the triggers that arose through exposure to client situations similar to my own family trauma. The support provided by the Institute's training program included specific guidance regarding professional self-care and the importance of maintaining personal therapy and peer consultation throughout practice development. The vision for long-term career development in family dynamics consulting was becoming more specific and achievable as I gained experience and expertise. The potential for specialization in adult-child financial exploitation, development of educational resources, and eventual training of other practitioners provided multiple pathways for professional growth that aligned with my values and capabilities. The transformation from personal crisis to professional calling was proceeding according to the framework that Rebecca Martinez had outlined during our early conversations. The financial recovery from the wedding cancellation was proceeding successfully alongside the investment in professional development, demonstrating that both short-term crisis management and long-term career planning could be managed simultaneously with appropriate planning and resource allocation. The discipline required for this dual focus was developing capabilities that would be valuable throughout my professional life, regardless of specific career directions. The relationship with Patricia remained unresolved, though not actively problematic, as she had apparently accepted the consequences of her actions without attempting further manipulation or demanding additional explanations. The absence of continued conflict provided space for focusing on professional development, while maintaining readiness to implement boundary enforcement if future issues arose. The skills I was developing through certification training would be valuable for managing any future family relationship challenges. The contrast between the manipulative family dynamics I had experienced and the respectful professional relationships I was developing through the Institute provided ongoing validation for the career direction I had chosen. The colleagues and mentors I was meeting through professional development demonstrated that authentic relationships based on mutual respect and shared values were achievable and sustainable when both parties were committed to ethical principles and personal growth. The comprehensive nature of this career transition represented a complete integration of personal healing with professional contribution that transformed the pain of family betrayal into expertise that could benefit others facing similar challenges. The woman who had been excluded from her mother's wedding reception was becoming a certified professional whose knowledge and experience could prevent others from experiencing similar exploitation while building a meaningful career based on authentic service and genuine competence. The completion of my certification training at the Institute for Family Financial Dynamics coincided with a significant breakthrough in my work with Margaret Thompson, whose transformation from financial exploitation victim to empowered boundary enforcer provided concrete validation of the professional expertise I had been developing over the previous 18 months. Margaret's success in establishing sustainable financial boundaries with her manipulative adult son demonstrated that the systematic approaches I had learned through formal training could create lasting positive change in the lives of people facing similar challenges to those I had experienced with Patricia. The final phase of Margaret's consulting relationship involved implementing comprehensive financial protection strategies that addressed both immediate boundary enforcement needs and long-term security planning. The systematic approach we had developed together included specific communication protocols for responding to future financial requests, legal documentation that formalized appropriate financial assistance while preventing exploitation, and ongoing support systems that would maintain her progress after our formal consulting relationship concluded. The thoroughness of this planning reflected the comprehensive nature of the training I had received while demonstrating my ability to translate theoretical knowledge into practical client outcomes. Margaret's transformation was remarkable in its scope and sustainability. When we had begun working together, she had been providing approximately $2,000 per month to her son through various loans and direct payments that were never repaid and had gradually increased in frequency and amount over a 3-year period. The total financial loss exceeded $70,000, representing a significant portion of her retirement savings and creating genuine concern about her long-term financial security. The emotional toll of this exploitation had been equally severe, as Margaret struggled with guilt, anxiety, and confusion about how to maintain her relationship with her son while protecting her financial interests. The boundary enforcement strategies we developed together enabled Margaret to reduce her son's financial support to zero while maintaining emotional connection and family relationship. The process required approximately 6 months of consistent implementation and involved several challenging conversations, where Margaret needed to maintain her boundaries, despite significant emotional pressure and manipulation attempts from her son. The success of this approach validated both the training I had received and my ability to apply it effectively in complex family situations. The communication techniques that proved most effective in Margaret's case were direct questioning strategies similar to those I had used with Patricia, combined with systematic documentation of interactions and clear consequences for boundary violations. Margaret learned to respond to financial requests with specific questions about repayment plans, justification for the expenses, and alternative solutions that did not involve her financial resources. The systematic nature of this approach prevented emotional manipulation while maintaining respectful communication that preserved family relationships. The legal documentation component of Margaret's protection plan included updated estate planning documents, formal loan agreements for any future financial assistance, and powers of attorney that prevented unauthorized access to her financial accounts. The involvement of an elder law attorney ensured that all protective measures were legally sound while educating Margaret about her rights and options for addressing financial exploitation. The comprehensive nature of this planning provided security while demonstrating the importance of coordinated professional support for complex family financial situations. The emotional aspects of Margaret's transformation were equally significant and required ongoing attention throughout our working relationship. The guilt and anxiety that had characterized her initial response to her son's exploitation gradually gave way to confidence and empowerment as she experienced the positive outcomes of boundary enforcement. The improved quality of her relationship with her son, which had been strained by the financial exploitation, provided additional validation for the effectiveness of the strategies we had implemented together. Margaret's success story became a powerful case study that Dr. Williams incorporated into training materials for future certification candidates, demonstrating the potential impact of skilled family dynamics consulting while providing inspiration for other practitioners developing their expertise in this field. The opportunity to contribute to professional education through my client work represented an unexpected form of validation that confirmed my readiness for independent practice, while highlighting the value of the systematic approach I had developed through formal training. The networking opportunities that emerged through Margaret's case included referrals to other potential clients and connections with professionals in related fields who were interested in collaborating on complex family, financial situations. The reputation I was building through successful client outcomes created momentum for practice development while establishing credibility within the professional community. The transition from student to practitioner was proceeding according to the timeline and goals I had established at the beginning of my certification training. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.